Hello, I've got a really long one for you today. I'm going to cover cyber warfare. For a start, the internet was developed in the late 80s, and it was used mainly by scientific and educational establishments like colleges and universities. And I suppose the first major conflict where cyber warfare would have been used would have to be the first Gulf War back in 1995, I think it was, where Saddam Hussein's Iraqi army invaded their neighbours Kuwait. And so, as a consequence of that, the United States formed a coalition with Britain and Saudi Arabia and a number of other countries under a United Nations resolution to liberate Kuwait. Now, if you look back at the tabloids, newspapers were very common back in those days. And if you looked at the propaganda, you could see that there was a very overt propaganda being used by the Allies. For example, we learned everything about the A-10 tank busters, the JDAM missiles, Patriot missiles. We heard about the B-2 Spirit bomber, which is the latest in stealth technology, the elusive F-117, and we heard an awful lot about how technologically advanced this Gulf War was going to be, and that it was going to be over in less than a day. They were going to rain missiles on top of the Iraqis, and in fairness, it was pretty much very one-sided. There wasn't much information to come back to us on what the Iraqis were doing or whether they were preparing. So there was overt propaganda there, but also what none of us is actually aware of was that there would have been a lot of clandestine operations going on, and particularly with the fact that Iraq would have had universities that would have been connected to the internet, and those systems would have been hacked and they would be tapped, and the information would be any traffic, any communications that would be going on between Iraq and the rest of the world would have been monitored and analysed, and for any sort of intelligence at all to be taken for it. One particular commander that was in the first Gulf War, his name was Lieutenant Colonel Tim Collins of the 1st Royal Irish Regiment, and he was famous for making a speech before the war started. He also wrote a book on his experiences in the war, and if you look at it, there is a chapter there where he was explaining what he was seeing as they were advancing into Iraq. What they were coming across was a lot of Iraqi army soldiers surrendering in very large numbers. And he did comment on the fact that they were severely fatigued. They looked like they hadn't slept in days, if not weeks. He also noticed that their artillery, their tanks, their weapon systems were largely intact and in perfect working order. There was absolutely no reason for the Iraqis to put up a fight, but they simply weren't willing to do that. And I suppose you could say that could have been a result of the fact that, for example, in terms of them being fatigued and tired, would have been because for many weeks before the advance, the Iraqi army knew that they were going to be attacked. They just simply didn't know when. And with propaganda saying that the invasion was imminent, they didn't know, was it going to happen next week? Was it going to happen tomorrow? Was it going to happen in 10 minutes' time? They simply did not know. So they had to be on perfectly alert through all this time. So they were very badly fatigued and tired out. Furthermore, with all the propaganda that could have been leaking through the internet from the universities about all the different technologies that the Allies had and were itching to use on them, they would have been very stressed, and they would have also realized that it was a very bad idea for them to invade their neighbors. So they would have been demoralized as well. So that's what I have to say about the Gulf War. And actually, yeah, that you could almost argue that particular conflict would have shown cyber warfare in its purest form, because it was totally new, and the idea was to totally demoralize the enemy, take away their passion to put up a fight, and keep them off balance completely. So I have my notes here. So right after the Gulf War, the term hacker came about in the 90s, and a hacker was back then was somebody who would hack into corporate networks, government networks, and their ideas was to either embezzle money out of a company or siphon money out of a company, or just find out what the government secrets were. And by and large, they were seen as urban warriors. They were seen as Robin Hood types. They were you had white hackers, you had black hackers. White hackers were IT people who just simply wanted to test each other's systems, and if they did manage to hack into somebody's system, they'd actually pass that information on to the relevant authorities and explain exactly how they did it. But then you also had the black hackers who basically, once they discovered that they could put a computer on the internet and start tapping into other people's into other corporations and breaking into their networks, it was seen as a way of embezzling money or taking advantage of corporations and governments at the time. That all came to pass after Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden was an ex-CIA operative. He was an analyst for the CIA, and he published a scatter of papers on WikiLeaks, where he pointed out for all the world to see that the United States had in fact been gathering information, everybody's data, and analyzing it and tracking it, and it didn't matter who it was. It was everybody and anybody that they could track and follow. That was quite a shock to us, and it did come to light that there were other governments out there that were doing pretty much the same thing, where they had nondescript data centers out in the middle of nowhere, hooked into the internet, and literally pulling people's personal data and God knows whatever else out, and sifting through it, analysing it, and figuring out what to do next with it. And we learned there in the early 2000s, after 2010, you could say, we heard of the likes of Cambridge Analytica, which is a software company that specialises in tracking people's information, analysing it, and using algorithms to suggest or encourage people to do certain things. And what they were doing was they were going to political parties around the world and selling their ware, and the idea was that they could push a vote one way or the other, swinging votes. As a consequence, that caused great paranoia, and it caused people to doubt the whole democratic process. Furthermore, we have Facebook, which does pretty much the same as Cambridge Analytics, and they have access to all our data, but they also have access to our feelings and how we feel about certain issues. And the likes of Twitter and Facebook are, they were put, there was an inquiry into them, and it was pointed out that they could actually foment and cause people to think in certain different ways, either negatively or positively. Either way, it was adding to their bottom lines in their profits. Another significant issue online is the porn and the violence. Porn and violence, it's actually illegal for a sex worker to work in Ireland. However, anybody can get online and access porn of the worst nature and violence of the worst nature, and there's absolutely no regulation whatsoever to stop them from doing so. As a consequence of that, those kind of people, they're falling into an addiction. It's a dangerous addiction because, firstly, financially, they're leaving themselves open to getting hacked and getting their personal details leaked online. But on top of that, it's all about the algorithms. Like if you're looking for something, firstly, those algorithms won't allow you to find whatever it is until you pay top money to get into it. And secondly, it only takes a change in that algorithm to turn you in towards depression or make you feel inadequate in any way. Violence as well, like they could really turn up the juice on somebody and really make somebody psychotic in a way. And what do we have in the future? We also have Metaverse, or the Metaverse, which is virtual reality. The idea is that you can literally create a digital life for yourself online. There is a lot of benefits to it. However, it's yet to be seen what kind of negatives are to come about it. So what can we do as military enthusiasts to actually prevent or work against these kind of cyber warfare? Well, if you start with hacking, what I like to do is I keep a notebook of all my account numbers, my passwords, and I also make a point to whatever passwords that I have, they have to be at least 12 digits long, scattered a couple of upper lowercase letters into it and numbers, and also special characters like exclamation mark or an ampersand or a quotation mark, just throwing them in. And believe it or not, like it takes a hacker less than a second to figure out a 4-digit password. But when it comes to a 12-digit password, it takes them something like 33-40 years. Okay. Secondly, when it comes to getting onto social networks and networks that are gauging your feelings and your views on certain things, what we could do is play neutral, stay completely neutral on the internet. If you were to put a scale where 0 is completely depressed and 10 is completely excited, don't go onto the internet unless you're feeling a level 4, and don't stay on the internet if you're feeling beyond 6. A level 4 and 6 is a nice neutral area there, and save your 0 to 1, 0 to 2, and save your 7 to 10 for real life human contact with other people. Save your real feelings for real people. On top of that, and furthermore, as for in regards porn and violence, it's not healthy for you in any shape or form. So the best thing you could do is completely avoid it. One thing that you can do with your devices is you can download a porn blocker or parental controls on your Google. It's definitely well worth checking out. That's all I have to say. Take care.